Hey, welcome to Practical Music Theory. In this video, we're going to briefly talk about secondary dominants, what they are, how they work, and how you might be able to use them in your own writing. Perfect. So the first thing that you need to know is in order for something to be a secondary dominant, we have to have an understanding of what a dominant is. So this really goes back to the idea that every key or every chord in a key is resulting off of triads built on notes in a scale. So let's write a C major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. All right, and let's write all of the chords. Right, it would be C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G, B, D, that's G major, A minor, B diminished, and C major. All right. So then I'll sort of talk about the specialty names for every single one of these. So I've sort of been talking about the one chord being a tonic triad, and tonic is really whatever the key is named after. So this is the key of C major. The first triad is a C major chord. All right, that's tonic. The second most important thing for us to talk about is the fifth one, which is really what this whole video is about, and that is the dominant. Now, 5 is so important for various reasons. For instance, the circle of fifths is built off of essentially a series of fifths, right? And so that perfect fifth, that 5-to-1 relationship, the dominant, which is 5, to tonic, which is 1, relationship, is the foundation for all of Western music. Hearing that tension, that pull from 5-to-1 is how really much of our music works. And let's sort of just demonstrate that. Here's a G major 5-to-1, which is C major. Great. Now, what a secondary dominant is trying to do is reestablish that 5-to-1 relationship for another chord that is not tonic. So if this, we call this G major dominant, and we call this C major chord tonic. The question is, well, what if we recontextualized another pitch to appear temporarily to be tonic as it pushes somewhere else? So this is a temporary tonicization, not a permanent thing. Now, a permanent shift in the key center is called a modulation, and we're not talking about that. So let's do this on a very simple chord progression that a lot of people are familiar with. Let's do it on a 2-5-1. All right, so first, what is a 2-5-1? Well, 2-5-1 in the key of C major is built off the second, so that's D minor, so D, F, A. 5, as we talked about, is G major, so G, B, D. And 1 is just tonic triad, C, E, G. And just for the purposes of explaining this, I'm not going to worry about voice leading. All right. So, in this example, here's our 2-5-1. What we're trying to do is recontextualize how we're going to hear this 2 and a secondary dominant. So we're going to have another dominant or another 5 and make this 2 appear temporarily to be 1. And so what we do is called a 5 of, or dominant of, whatever the bottom note is whatever it's pointing to. So if I want to temporarily make 2 appear to be 1, I want a 5 of 2. Okay, how do I do that? Well, what I first need to do is figure out what is a 5 chord, and I'm pretending that 2 or D is where I'm going. So what's 5 in D? Well, a 5 chord in D major is built off the 5th, so it's something A. All right, so I start with A, some kind of C, some kind of E. And what I need here is I need to make this a 5 chord, not a minor 5 chord, but a major 5 chord. So, A to C, is that a major third or is that a minor third? Well, it's a minor third. Another way I could think about that is if I'm in D major, how many sharps or flats does D major have? Well, D major has 2 sharps. It has F sharp and C sharp. Well, there's a C in this chord, so we should know it's C sharp. Cool. And this becomes now a 5 of 2, meaning it's a dominant chord, pretending that we're in the key of this 2. So let's hear how that sounds. All right. Well, similarly, I can do other secondary dominants, or secondary chords is really a more accurate. So if I say that a 2-5-1 is a very common progression, what if I did a 2 of 2, then a 5 of 2, and then a 2? And now I'm essentially using 2 chords to point or temporarily make 2 appear to be where I'm trying to land. All right, that's a lot, so let's sort of talk that out. All right, what is a 2 of 2? All right, so I pretend for a minute I'm in D major, because our sort of default thinking setting is some sort of major key. All right, so D, what is 1 up from D? So D is 1, what's 2? Well, it's some kind of E. What quality is a 2 chord always going to be in a major key? 2 chords always going to be minor. So is E, G, B the correct notes? Well, how many sharps or flats are in the key of E major? That would be 4 sharps. It would be F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. So this G I know should be a G sharp, but it's G natural. So it's a minor third E to G. Another way I can think about it is well, let's just say it's an E minor chord. All right. Now, what I told you is that this E minor chord is really functioning not as an E minor chord in the key of C major, because it's really trying to recontextualize this 5 chord in this 2 chord to this 2 chord. So I would call this a 2 of 2. I have here a 5 of 2, right? Because I didn't change that. And then lastly is the 2-5-1. So let's hear what that whole line sounds like. Let's just listen to these 3 first. All right, and the whole section. All right, let's try a little bit of voice leading. Now, it would be more proper for me to change the Roman numerals, but because we're really focused right now in this video on function rather than correct naming, and we're really just changing the spelling of the chords so that it's closer together and sounds nicer, I'm not going to bother with that. So, for voice leading, really what I'm trying to do is make the notes as close together as possible. All right, so here's an E, here's an E. I'll go ahead and move this up. Now it's a 2-6. This G is close to A, this B is close to C sharp, so I'm not going to really gain anything by moving it. So this chord is good. If I moved this D up, it would be closer to this E, so that's a good option. If I moved the F up, that would be a good option too, because F is close to E and the D is close to E, so these two are close. I've moved the bottom note up. That's good. All right. How about 5? I can move this G up. Right? We have sort of an ascending line idea. Or I could just leave it where it was. That's another valid option. Because we're coming into 1, which 1 we know needs to be in root position because tonic chords have the strongest. But maybe to help it out a little bit more, I double the C because C is close to B and D. Now I can listen to a slightly better voice-led version. Let's listen to it. Perfect. And really, that is secondary chords in a nutshell. All you have to do is find out first, when you're thinking about labeling something secondary, is this chord trying to temporarily retonicize a different chord? A big red flag is if you start seeing sharps and flats in a key where it usually does not belong. That's a very big red flag because, well, obviously this C sharp is not in the key of C major. So that's a potential, hey, it might be if I'm analyzing it. Or if I'm trying to create it, it's about, well, what am I trying to accomplish with it? I'm trying to retonicize a different chord. And that's how it works.